and Information Science from the University of Massachusetts, and currently working as the coordinator of the Open University and Distance Education of UNAM, and Vice President of the Latin American Higher Education Association, member of the Board of Directors of the Common Space for Higher Education, Distance Education, and coordinator in Mexico of the Virtual Education Association. Thank you to all of you. Good afternoon. I would like to begin, like all of my colleagues, I'd like to begin by thanking the IOHE and the UTPL for the invitation. And this visit to this part of the world that has been, it's been a marvelous visit in every sense. Also, I would like to thank Hélène Lamique for having agreed to trade places with me, because for reasons of the agenda, I have to travel early tomorrow morning to Mexico City. And so she kindly allowed us to change order, and it's going to work out fine, because what I'm going to say will work as a segue between this session and the first session in the morning. And even I'd like to
Well, you're not going to believe what has happened in the last 5 minutes, or at least in the last 20 minutes that I've been sitting there. But as my collaborators know that they can do whatever they want, when I'm not there, they decided to disconnect all servers, and my presentation, I have it in the servers themselves. So I have been telling you what you can't imagine. So I hope that along my presentation they connect themselves back up, and I can tell you about the pages that are missing, but I think that they go along the same lines as the presentation, as the last presentation, where the idea of creating a common space amongst universities is not a simple task but quite complicated, because it implies the participation not only of authorities, of the high officers, but also of the academia and as well as the students. So I'm going to talk about a project that we have been carrying out in Mexico, and many of the problems that we have found along the path have to do with using knowledge in order to maybe not make optimum decisions, but at least make good decisions. Divide the presentation in 4 parts. First, an introduction to provide you with a scenario where we can work, and then what we need to do inside the institution, and then all the work that can be done defining the academic activities that can be carried out, and then appoint institutions, and then all of us get to work and get to do it. And then also a project that we carried out and that generates a very modest common space but a very high impact inside the Colegio de las Americas and IOHE. And for that I'm going to understand as knowledge management the idea of planning, organizing, directing and controlling everything that we have in our hands as resources, coordinating activities that have to be carried out in order to achieve the goals and objectives that we have posed for ourselves in the most efficient and reliable manner as possible. Inside UNAM, the infrastructure is rather complex. At the higher level, the high level authorities, the principal's office is conformed by various divisions that help it to carry out the 3 substantial tasks that the university is to carry out: research, teaching, and the extension of history and general knowledge. In the first portion, we have the coordination of distance education, distance learning, and their various offices of the central administration conform something similar to an academic secretariat, and from there we cooperate with the schools and faculties in order to carry out tasks that have to do with teaching, but also we cooperate with the research institutes and centers, both in scientific research as well as humanities research, in order to carry out activities of research, particularly those that have to do with the topic that corresponds to us, and that is the non-presential or distance learning. Inside the university, and for over 450 years, you can imagine the level of bureaucracy and the number of entities that have been conformed, and the majority of work starting a long time ago is done through small networks. Under all modalities, we have an environment where we have the participation of professors and researchers, students and organizers, through networks that we could say that are the sources of knowledge, that are active and that are constantly producing knowledge. We also have databases, repositories, libraries, and they could be under the group of passive information depositories, and how the university itself is evolving. And all along this time, and with the development of different technologies, we have generated an infrastructure that allows us to have the very good likelihood of incorporating the use of technologies in the teaching learning processes and in the research tasks that the institution carries out. And in our case, we're attempting to incorporate another network, which is represented by these circles in red, which are computation agents based on intelligence devices, in order to be able to make more efficient the management of all the administrative and academic process that we carry out. And all of this is under a social context. The social context, in reality, I think that the tone of our presentation has been that it is not a social context that is very favorable. For Mexico, we have a few indicators in order for you to understand. Competitives, we're in the place 60 of 134, index of human development in 52, registration in higher education 74, the quality of education system 109, the quality of education in math and science 127, coverage only 27%, and besides, we're a country where we have what we wanted to call a demographic bonus that we don't, if we're not careful, we're not going to be able to take advantage of. And the fact is that we have over 44 million youth. However, almost 7.5 million of them are not either working or studying. So the social context is one where the task of higher education institutions are so important. Well, all of this information and all of this work in reality is what obliges us to work with very good planning, and we do it at all levels. For example, you can see on the page of the principal of UNAM all the planning work that he did in his management period from 2007 to 2011. I would like to show you or present before you 4.3, which are the guidelines for the proposed management or managerial style. There are basically 14 activities, and each one of them has a last name. Coordination, for example, has to do with point number 5, which is expand and diversify the programs of the university, and it has to do with the open distance learning and everything that has to do with continuous education. departing from this planning process at institutional level, and I'm being told that I'm okay. The signal is coming in. We do the planning of all offices, and then we begin our work. As an example, I had brought 5.3 that has to do with promoting the expansion of the supply and coverage of education services online. And everything that is achieved through this means to be used by teachers and students of the present system. This is one of the ones that I wanted to present. I'm going to present some of the tools that we have developed. We have in UNAM a project that is called 13R for a repository of digital resources. They only brought it out halfway, as you can see. Alright, it pulled some of the information, and in reality this is a task that is done by the engineering professors in order to bring online some of the material that is auxiliary for students. The main objectives to be fulfilled are defined. The materials that are needed are set forth there. It is present in different forms. We can see it graphically. We can see the equations, and there are learning activities where they can manipulate some of the parameters and can begin to better understand the concepts of what we want them to review. And it is about having a group of objects for learning, particularly in the high index of complexity and little understanding, and this is placed online in a permanent manner. Also, if I'm able to enter this one, which caused all the problems. One of the results of diagnosis that we have made is that professors generate very good quality material in regards to content, but they all have them in their shelves, and the idea would be that they be able to develop them in a format that is accessible to all students. And we have been working in a space called UNAM Media Campus, where we are developing units for the support of learning, and there's also material from some academic events where what we have is the gurus, the experts on these topics, and we make all attempts so that the material is available both for teachers as well as for students to be utilized online, or they can be utilized outside of the network in their everyday tasks. For example, there was a forum on the contributions of Darwin, and we arrived at the conclusion that creation and evolution do not compete. They can certainly live together. And we held a discussion, and I would like you to review its contents, and I think there you're going to understand what is available. There is a number of elements that are growing in an important manner, so that secondary students and pre-graduate students can have access to materials that can help them in order to improve their performance, academic performance. So it is true that putting teachers to work is complicated, it's difficult, but we have to understand that it is not impossible. I think that when teachers get involved, ever since the beginning of projects, it's much easier than when agreements are done, and then agreements are just left on their hands to be executed. What we have done in Mexico at the public universities is to make attempts so that teachers get involved ever since the beginning of projects, so that they are the ones that drive the execution of things. And this has allowed in the last few years, and in spite of the fact that UNAM at present has 305,000 students for pre-graduate, and that the physical facilities are not big enough, we can continue including more students in distance learning. As you can see in this graph, the slope has been growing consistently. But the way in which it grows is insufficient with a single institution. That's why in 2004, 8 higher education institutions founded a common space for higher education, where the idea is to promote spaces for the convergence of both teachers as well as students, and not to make attempts to enter the discussions that have taken so long regarding the credit portion, the recognition portion, and begin in a more pragmatic fashion our work. Along these lines, some programs have been defined. One of the programs separated itself and generated what is known as the Common Space for Higher Education at a Distance. And we began with separate institutions, and the fact that we were able to work after various working sessions was that if we could do better what we were already doing, or if we could do a little bit of what wasn't being done, it would be worthwhile. We respect the diversity amongst all of us. We don't want all doing the same thing. We respect diversity, and we attempt to make joint projects where we have similarities. The objective is to join efforts to offer pertinent and quality education, and through this promote equity through improving coverage. There's a strategy backing all of these ideas, and the idea is to move all individuals up to an educational offer that they would like to share with others. And in that space, those who need it can take it under different schemes of cooperation, where if one university wants that program to incorporate it in its curricular program, they can do it, supported by the originator. And if they don't want to incorporate it, but need to offer it in its space, then the other university makes the necessary outreach in as long as it's needed. We did our first project. It was a prospective planning, and what I would like to show you in regards to this is only one of the conclusions that we arrived at, because what we were told by those who assisted us in the prospective study is that ECOESaD, as it was just an emergent system, highly unstable, and that besides there were too many variables that we didn't have a good hold on. So out of that, projects emerged in order to be able to consolidate and see if we could make the project viable. Yeah? The problems that all emerge, as always. The most serious of all is financing, but fortunately the Secretariat of Public Education of Mexico, through the Subsecretariat of Higher Education, has provided us with the necessary funds for the projects that we have been presenting, and that they have evaluated as feasible. I've been told that I have 15 minutes left, no, 5 minutes left. So please let me see if I can enter the web page of this space to show you directly how we have been working and the type of projects and activities that we have at hand. In reality, the first important portion is the fact that we work through the conformation of networks that are small, but that can carry out projects that are viable and that can be executed. We have one at university level where we have 6 universities where 6 different programs that are making outreach in rural places and in places where there's no other option for secondary education. We have thematic networks such as in nursing, we have research networks, and the reality is that in Mexico, researchers in the area of education with technology, there are many, but they are pulverized, they're granulated amongst universities. So this network has allowed us to bring them together and to have a rather important number of researchers working in common projects. The beginning of the project we had 7 universities, but starting last year, we had the addition of all the state universities and some like the National Polytechnic Institute, the Colegio de Mexico, and so now the space is conformed by 39 institutions of higher education, and the characteristic is that all of them are public. The educational offer is at all levels, from the secondary school to pre-graduate and postgraduate, and what we attempt to do is to make an effort to define projects where we, together with the Secretariat of Education, can offer part of what we have ready. What I'm showing you is the listing of all careers where we have the presential as well as learning at a distance, and they are all working at a higher education level. Each one of these programs in this space has a description, a homogeneous file, and with this offer in January this year, we made the first offer of careers under this common space where we offered 36 graduate programs and 16 new spaces for admission in the different programs that were offered. This appointment is over now, and now we're preparing for 2010, where the idea is again to reopen the possibility for 10,000 new spaces for new admissions. I think that it is true that creating a common space is quite complicated, but I think it's much more complicated to consolidate it and maintain it. But all along this project, what we do have is the working formula. Well, each one of the items that are presented here implies the participation of certain people and of people that have a specific task to do. For example, in the academic group, their task is to coadjuvate so that the distance learning is carried after, not only through the active work of institutions, but also through the participation of the accrediting institutions, and so that they have the adequate instruments for the evaluations of distance learning. In Mexico, the National Council on Science and Technology has an instrument that has been developing through these focus groups, and if I am right, in January 2010 we start a assessment pilot project which are going to be evaluated for distance learning. We do things not so ambitiously, and the first project has the purpose of evaluating master's programs under professional guidance. In Mexico we have this and the forming of scientists, and there we consider that this is a task that should be full-time for institutions, and that's why CONACYT begins with the other part. But that is going to allow to take care of the quality of programs that people may subscribe to.
Finally, what I wanted to do was show you something that we've done with the IOHE, which entails a complicated thing, because part of administrative management is done in Montreal by the College of the Americas, and the coordination and development is done in Tlaxcala, in the central training center of the IOHE of UNAM, and the scholars throughout the continents generate the contents and validate these. Yes. Academic supply has generated important impact. The previous courses had major participation of 2,500 professors from the University of the Americas, with 128 professors from 17 countries serving people from 28 countries. And they participated by 700 participants over 20 countries, with 47 professors from 11 countries. What I would like to end by saying, what I'd like to end with is, actually, when we talk about the possibility of creating a Latin American area, or a Latin American area Latin America and the Caribbean. It should be a structure of a meta space. That is, we should try to make sure that we countries can create common spaces. So then we can participate in spaces beyond our borders. I think it would be too limited for one university in one country to participate in a common space when within the country there are a major number of higher education institutions. So I think that would be, and we have a good example in technology, which is the networks in Mexico. We have a network which is CUDI, for development of internet, that handles the whole national network, but also handles connections with the Clara network and with the networks in the United States and Asia. And then also we have Clara, which handles the region, but also handles the connection with the European networks and Asian networks. So, to be able to set up a common space, I think we should follow the example of the internet networks in terms of making a space of spaces so that really in our region we can get off the ground with projects that will not be so ambitious but will be doable. So thank you very much.